Hello and welcome back to my channel, where today we have a review for what could be the culmination, though I doubt it truly is, of the Halloween franchise, Halloween Ends. To watch Halloween Ends is to partake in a bewildering experience as you parse out the direction of this story that seems to sacrifice the franchise's identity for an experiment in horror by way of Hallmark. This is essentially a romance story masquerading under the guise of a traditional slasher, and what that entails does ignite some watchability, and I do appreciate the ambition of changing up the form of what a Halloween movie could be. You know, we're not seeing another retread of a great film in that this is just trying to recapture what the original 1978 Halloween film achieved. This is doing something different, and much like Halloween 3 Season of the Witch, you can appreciate the ambition of it trying to create a new distinct path for itself, but you can only respect it so far because ultimately this film cannot support these grand departures fully. This is a film that zigs every time you expect it to zag, and again, that may be a freeing experience, and you may then be in uncharted waters that you didn't anticipate to be in when you're in such a redundant sequel like a Halloween film. But those traditional paths, those zags, they're zags for a reason, and you have to be really strong as a cinematic storyteller to support those zigs, to take those lefts when every other instinct is telling you to take a right. All of these ideas are in separate films, and all of these films have separate primary protagonists, and that is the major problem with Halloween Ends. It never decides who the main character of the story is. When you look back on it, as I did, because I rewatched both Halloween 2018 and Halloween Kills before going to see Halloween Ends, this was such an interesting trilogy in how it was made, because there was an idea, at least there seems to be, of the complete arc of this trilogy. You know, characters are introduced, you know, the nurse and the doctor character from the second film were introduced in the first film, and they only have like one line in passing. So then you just look at Halloween Ends and you're like, was this always the plan? Were you always intending to end the story this way? Because if that's the case, then there are certain elements that I think should have been introduced much earlier. And honestly, the major problem throughout all three of these movies is that even though it wants to be about Laurie Strode, it's very disinterested in telling a story centered around her specifically. It's just shocking when you have one of the most iconic final girls in horror, and Jamie Lee Curtis's committed performance. What she gives in these moments throughout the entire trilogy, but especially in Halloween Ends, are great. They're empathetic, they're moving. You can really see the weight and the emotion that she's been carrying since 1978 in this performance. And the fact that the films just don't want to use her, it's mind-boggling. In Halloween Ends, we have the introduction of a new character, Corey Cunningham, as portrayed quite nicely by Rowan Campbell. He does some nice work here, as does the entire cast. I think as far as the performances go, this is probably the best acted of the three new Halloween films. Like Jamie Lee Curtis is great. Her character is given a little bit more shading because the movie takes, and we'll get into this, it has, I would argue, the longest first act that I've ever seen, because you're just lost of like, okay, what's happening? What's the first turning point? Where's the inciting incident? You're left unknowing because the movie, again, can't decide whose story is this. But in the first hour, Jamie Lee Curtis, Andy Matichak, who plays her granddaughter, and Rowan Campbell, they're given some nice work, and so there's some nice character beats between them. And you really get a sense that these characters are talking to each other, divorced from any conventions of the slasher. And this choice to have the characters be separate from the plot conventions of the horror genre does allow you to connect with them more. The problem is when it then seeps into those horror conventions as the second and third act take shape, then it feels that the first act was pointless because they're being used in the exact same way. In fact, it's made even worse because you could have took that time to just do more of the slasher conventions that people want out of a Halloween movie. If you're going to distract us with something new and something fresh, you can't just throw it out into a void hoping it connects to something, because then that's requiring the audience to do more work than the filmmakers are. And I think that is definitely the case with a lot of these elements, especially with Corey Cunningham. It almost feels that Laurie and Michael Myers especially are an afterthought. I wouldn't be surprised if the first draft of this story didn't include them, because the way they're integrated into this feels so tacked on and so anticlimactic that I'm just, again, shocked that this is what they thought would be the ending to this Halloween trilogy or quadrilogy if you're bringing in the original 1978 film. You get to the third act and you're just, why doesn't this hit as much as you're expecting it to? It just feels tired. It feels overblown. And Jamie Lee Curtis she's played this role so many times of the last stand against Michael Myers that there just really isn't any more resonance to this story. There's an ambivalence to the structural tension of this film, and this is what I wanted to mention, was because you're not quite sure whose story this is, so you don't know who to track the story for. You know, where is the first act end? Where does the second act begin? You can't really tell because the movie can't really tell. You know, you're always waiting for Michael Myers to show up to get the tension going, and the movie waits an infuriating amount of time to do that. Now, if the film's argument is that it wanted to subvert the audience expectations, play with the form of a Halloween movie, Michael Myers doesn't need to be in a Halloween movie. Here, you're expecting Michael Myers. He's on the poster. He's in the trailers. And so the fact that the movie just keeps him away so much, it's frustrating, and also then plays with your attachment to the story, because then you're entering this area of no man's land in terms of the tension. You don't know if you should be getting more scared or not, because you're like, is Michael Myers going to pop out? Oh no, the scene's over. Wait, he's not in that scene? What's happening here? I thought there was something intriguing to how Haddonfield is depicted, and that the town has been injected with so much fear from Michael Myers that it has pervaded into the ethos of their community. But then when Laurie takes reins of the story in the third act, then suddenly the entire town is coming together and is just all on one side. There's an inconsistency to who this movie is following, and then how that affects its perception of all of its other factors within the story. It's not a terrible movie, but it's just so misguided that you can't really forgive some of the choices it makes, because it just doesn't support it by the end. You know, the movies that came to mind that are similar, the comps for this film were It Chapter 2, The Conjuring 3. And while I enjoy those movies to varying degrees, you can admit that they're all lesser in terms of their predecessors, and they're missing the fundamental ingredients that made those original films work. Ultimately, Halloween Ends wants to break away from the formula of the franchise, but does it too late in the trilogy to find resonance. It's a film that wants to have its cake, or should I say candy, and eat it too. So that's my review of Halloween Ends. Let me know, did you see it in theaters or on Peacock this weekend? And what do you think about David Gordon Green's trilogy? It's very uneven for me. Halloween Kills I enjoyed, but I also don't think it's the type of film that I'm going to revisit season after season. But let me know what you thought in the comments below. Make sure to like, comment, and subscribe to not miss any new videos from Spoilers Ahead with Anthony Post. Thank you all so much, and I'll see you at the movies.